Welcome to Faith Works Live. Here's your host, Rebecca Haney.
Life is good, and we are here on FaithWorks Live. Hello to the saints, to the ain'ts, to anyone who's new around here. Welcome. I'm sure you'll find many reasons to stay, to cheer, to critique. I've heard it a lot over the last 24 hours. And joining me on this crazy adventure, Joel Kurtinitis, friend of the show. He is not only a Star Wars fan, but he's willing to look at actual celestial bodies. He and his whole family trucked it down to see the totality, the solar eclipse, and he is on very little sleep joining us now. How did that go, Joel?
It was good. The world is still here today, so I'm glad that I can actually record this after we missed. Unless we missed the rapture, maybe we missed the rapture, and maybe I'm not happy to be recording this. So,
all of my '90s reading choices prepared me for this.
Fair enough. Fair enough. When I hear you say totality, I hear you say totality, all I can think of is the voiceover guy from Mortal Kombat. I just feel like that needs maybe next time, right? Maybe next time we'll
That's exactly where my brain went. Okay. Yes. All right. So before we get to the serious stuff, because I do want to, we're talking about the most important issue and perhaps one of the biggest unforced errors on this that I've seen in a while. So just to put it politely, we'll get your thoughts on all that, on Trump, on life, on quote unquote abortion rights. I was on CNN last night. We might talk about that. First of all, finish this sentence for me. People say I'm strange. Does that make me a stranger?
Ooh, that my best friend was born in a manger.
Yes. Apparently that means we're officially old.
Yes. Oh, goodness. I can go way older than that, man. I can go to the golden age of CCM that was 1992.
Oh, yeah. Stephen Curtis Chapman. Mm-hmm. Michael W. Smith. I got him. We can go Amy Grant. We can go back. I can go Michael Card.
I'm not Amy Grant. We did say Christian.
But yeah, that's the meme that's going around, that if you know how to finish that sentence, then you're officially ancient. Or as the kids say, goodness. I'm dead. I'm dead. Yeah. Practically dead. I'm glad you made it back here. It was the eclipse, not the apocalypse, as it turns out. I'll just say yesterday, I was peacefully living life, being a mom, doing the homeschool thing. Life was good. And I got some calls from some of my fellow Republicans saying, hey, did you hear that CNN's trying to get a hold of you? And I thought, why? What did I do now? Believe me, I'm as surprised as anyone. And they said, well, they know that you got to talk with Donald Trump about life, and they wondered what your reaction was to his statement. And I said, what statement? Again, my blissful naivete. It was a good moment. I remember those times. And unfortunately, that was short-lived. So I discovered what the statement was. I said, yes, I do have thoughts. And I got to be on CNN to share a few of those for about 5 minutes. But so much more. 5 minutes is not enough to contain my thoughts. And also I like to get perspective. So you can pull me back from the ledge, Joel. I would love to hear
Not likely, but I appreciate the optimism.
We're just going to go over together. Like we're in this together. The statements, if people haven't heard it yet, I've linked to it. We've talked about it. I will highlight a few of the things that I thought were the most egregious. So this was a planned statement on the part of Donald Trump. He announced, I believe, on Truth Social, which is where he likes to hang out, because that's how news happens now, is big, important person or very popular person makes said statement. And then we go around and talk to all the people about how they feel about what that person just said. And it's really been working for Donald Trump, honestly, in his presidency. That's kind of his thing. But this one was a planned statement on abortion, his quote, abortion and abortion rights. And right there, it's already downhill. And why might that be? Well, Joel, when you hear the phrase as a pro-life advocate, why would you, and someone who deeply cares about this, and you hear the president who's supposedly pro-life use the phrase abortion rights, how do you respond?
Oh yeah, we were driving back from Illinois yesterday. Kelsey and I were, and we heard this come out, and we heard that phrase, and she thought the exact same thing. Abortion rights, doesn't that presume a right that's not ever mentioned in the Constitution, and was something that the justices in Roe v. Wade basically pulled out of thin air? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is it's using terms that undermine our position from the very start.
Right. It's adopting the language of the pro-abortion left, right, for sure. So he began the statement talking about IVF And this is in response to this big high-profile case in Alabama, a pretty egregious destruction that happened in a fertility clinic. Fertilized embryos, so we're talking about tiny human beings, were destroyed in that there was no care taken for them. And I'm not sure of every single detail in the case. Others might know more. But that was basically at issue. It was the personhood, essentially, of is the clinic liable for the destruction of tiny people? And do the parents then have redress? Because they were saying these were our kids. These were or even if you believe they were our potential kids or whatever adjective you want to put in there, and the clinic should be held responsible. So there's this case, goes to the Supreme Court, and the Alabama Supreme Court basically says, yeah, I mean, these are tiny people. And there has to be some accountability for the destruction of life. It's not nothing. How could you tell parents anything else? So then this, of course, gets vaunted into a case that's going to have repercussions about abortion, reproductive health. And now you're saying, well, there's all these ramifications for who can have IVF. And then all of the opinions about that start coming out, which honestly, I think must be what provoked this statement. He must have been in a bubble where he had campaign advisors. And you can give me your thoughts on this too, Joel. But my thought was, I don't know why. Why now is he coming out and giving his 4 minutes? Short version, I think he shot himself in the foot on this issue. It's a betrayal, it's a surrender. It's not good. Not good. Not good at all. Very bad. Not good. It's kind of like my Trump impression. I think it must have been because of this Alabama Supreme Court case. He had advisors that came in and said, you have to respond to this, and we have to take this off the table for the Democrats who are going to campaign strongly on abortion, and just keep clubbing him over the head with it. So he was trying to somehow just like take that issue off the table is what I'm guessing. I don't think he did that. I think this made things 20 times worse. But what do you think about that? We haven't really addressed IVF as an issue on the show for some time, so I'll leave it open if you want to go there. But that's kind of, to me, that's almost a separate issue that just happened to be the moment in which all of the right to life failings for Donald Trump have now come to light.
Yeah, as to the question of why, I've stopped asking that with regard to Trump for a few years now. I mean, at whatever point he posed with a taco salad on Cinco de Mayo with a caption that said, "I love Mexicans," I stopped asking why. I mean, why would anyone do any of these things? So, but to me, but what I will say about it is the statement regarding IVF. I mean, I've heard a lot of opinions on IVF. I've heard about the ethical considerations about how it's done and if there's an ethical way to move forward with that as a country. Those are all debates you can have. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that I don't have an opinion. I do, but I think it's secondary with regard to this video, to the point of the language that Trump was using. Because it's one thing to say, it's a complex issue and I'm not educated on this, so I'm just going to go and talk to my advisors, or I'm going to forbear an opinion at this time. Mm-hmm. Any of those things would have been valid. To take it and wrap it in the pro-life, pro-family messaging of the Republican Party and say, because we are pro-life, we think you should be able to create thousands of tiny humans and then freeze them and kill them when you don't want them anymore. Mm-hmm. That's gross. That was really gross. Like, if you want to have an opinion on it, you go ahead, but don't take the cloak of the pro-life because we love life so much and because we love babies so much. Like that's just, that made my skin crawl. It was hard to listen to even that part. I thought, surely how wrong can he get this? Well, it was pretty wrong. It's something that it needs moral clarity. My wife and I have been reading through Uncle Tom's Cabin lately, and the kids are studying Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War in their homeschool co-op. So we've had a lot of exposure to the debates around slavery. There had to be moral clarity around that. The entire tactic of one side was euphemisms, was high-sounding language, and tying together illogical groupings of things so that they could defend them together. All sorts of tactical tricks. On the other side, what had to happen was just moral clarity. Mm-hmm. And that was missing entirely from everything Trump said. It was just like you said, an unforced error that I think is going to cost him.
I think it should. I think you hit it right on the head, Joel, that the problem is a lack of moral clarity from leadership. And when I look at this, and I saw about a day has passed since all this has transpired, I saw 3 rounds of headlines. One was Trump's statement on life, what made this so egregious. And then it was the response, the outrage to the headlines. And then it was essentially the reconciliation. which is pro-lifers still back Trump, even though he says these things. So I want to get to that Bermuda Triangle into which we politically disappear. And it's going to wreck the ships, guys. I'm calling. There's rocks. There's rocks up ahead, guys. We can't do this. No. But just to clarify, the reason that the statement was so egregious was he starts out with, he says the term abortion rights. Then he moves into the IVF, where he is clearly not dedicated much thought at all. But then he also undercuts that argument by saying essentially, now Roe v. Wade is done. We sent it back to the states. That's where everybody wanted it. And basically, it's off the table. And the Democrats are extremists. So he does point out tactic now of the GOP to say, well, look at what they're doing over there. They're so bad, which, yeah, that's true. If Kamala Harris goes to one more abortion clinic for her campaign stop, it makes me want to throw up in love, like scripturally, like a dog returning to its vomit. It doth make me want to hurl. To see someone campaigning on the bodies of children, the destruction of families, the lies, the deception that we have peddled to women to throw away our own futures in the name of progress. That's what they're basing their campaign on. So they're open, they're out and proud, child sacrifice, yay, unlimited. That's what we stand for. Okay. So he's right to point that out, and anybody is. That is extreme, to say the least. The problem, though, is that we're now looking at that, and he says, well, it just belongs to the states. What he says is that's okay in California. He says it's about the will of the people, that this is all this is about. And that's a quote, the will of the people. So if California wants to do that, those children aren't children. They don't have any rights. If Iowa wants to protect children, then that's okay for Iowa. If Florida wants to protect, which, by the way, he's a resident of Florida. They asked him about that, and he's like, I don't know which way I'm going to vote on protecting babies or not. Hello? Aren't you the most pro-life president of my lifetime? Shouldn't you know this by now, sir? This makes me so mad. Bring me back. I can't, like, in my anger, do not sin.
I think
I can't do this. This is a states' rights issue. Suddenly, children are children based. Humans are humans based on state lines.
No, I was just going to say he just won the Libertarian Party vote.
Ugh.
Right. That's so there's that 2% that
in the bag.
Been talking. Yeah, that's been talking about that for years and years. That's been their case, and it's been a complete cop out. And that's why I've just never been, willing to be affiliated in that direction, despite other positions that I might have more in common with them.
Right.
But on that front, I'm honestly back to who did he think he was winning with that? Like who was this? And it makes it all the worse. He started out by saying it was a planned statement. I didn't know that. I just assume everything he says is unplanned. But but the fact that it was a planned statement makes it so much worse. Because thoughtless Trump, everybody gets. And because everybody gets it, everybody defends it. Everybody I know, well, Trump, that's just Trump. That's just Trump being Trump. Can't do that with a planned statement. This was not impromptu. This was not him firing back at an overzealous moderator. This is campaign speech. This is planned. And so denying your own principle like that, I don't know how you effectively walk that back. How do you win that trust back? And framing it this way, we knew he was going to capitalize on his achievement with Roe, and then point to the Democrats and say Democrats bad. Okay, that's been done. But trying to build a case beyond that, I don't know if he's capable of it at this point. And he really gave it away at the end when he said, "Well, we won." I don't remember exactly how he phrased it. We won the battle we've been fighting for 50 years. Did we? Was that the goal? The whole goal was just how many pro-life rallies has he been to now where they said the goal is just to get Roe repealed and that's the end, close the book? Because I've been to a lot for decades now, and I've never heard one. I never heard a pro-lifer say that, we pack our bags when Roe is gone. That's the beginning. That's D-Day.
Right.
That's not the end. And so that mischaracterization is just wild to me. And again, such a striking contrast to the leadership of Lincoln and the Republicans in the North during their fight to end slavery. It was just unbelievable, the contrast there. I mean, imagine where the country would be right now if they had just agreed to disagree on some of those issues.
Well, and I think that comparison is apt because, again, that's probably the most well-known case of the states' rights argument failing on its face. Failing when it came to the humanity to the right to life and liberty of fellow human beings who had been dehumanized for profit and gain. That's what we're talking about. The last time we told people that their rights depended, their humanity depended on geographically where they lived, or on the opinions of enough people, the opinion of the majority being willing to say, yeah, okay, you're a human being. Yeah, okay, I guess you got some rights. We're going to protect you. That was the Civil War. And the fact that we were willing to compromise for several decades before that is essentially what led to the point of the bloodiest conflict in American history, because we were willing to compromise with human lives. And this had been boiling for some time. And I think it is an equivalent issue today to say that millions upon millions of our own children are only human based on how many people we can get to defend them at a given time, or on the geographical boundary wherein they happen to be conceived.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's important to point out in that, if we can sort of turn the page here a little bit to the political side.
Sure.
I think it's important to point out there's a difference between the messaging aspect of this and the messaging that would have been going on if we're talking about the Civil War. We've talked about the Lincoln movie before, and the importance of having those more radical, at the time, abolitionists sort of back their messaging down to get the 13th Amendment through, right? Okay, that's really important. The goal stayed the same. The messaging changed. This is not a messaging difference. This is a goal difference. I mean, that's part of to me, the real threat of this for the unity of the Republican Party, if there ever was such a thing. And in the lead up
maybe
to
in Lincoln's day.
yeah, right.
Not even then.
When the rest of them left, yeah.
Right.
But I think that's the real danger between now and November. Also, is that you have this. Okay, where are we going then? If this is his goal, then where does that put the rest of us as pro-lifers that want to continue moving this ball? I mean, clearly it's not going to be okay. Just look. So for years and years now, there's been this fight again. Allusion to the libertarians in your audience here. We've been fighting over states' rights and marijuana for how long now? Okay, but did it ever stop anyone? Did a state restricting marijuana ever stop anyone from getting it? No, never. It never did, because they would cross the border, get what they wanted, and come back, right? There's no way to enforce those things. And so saying on the abortion issue, we'll just leave it to the states, is basically conceding the issue. You're not going to be able. I understand. Now, again, if you want to leave the goal out front and make a case for progressive regulation and whatever, which I've heard for years, I can at least hear you out on that, and we can talk about it, figure out policy improvements. Texas got really creative with their abortion restrictions, things like that might work. But you don't just stop there, because that's not going to. You're talking about saving lives. You're not saving lives that way. You're just forcing people to use more gas. That's all. So there's really got to be a solution here, and I just don't see that vision. And leadership fundamentally is about vision. Where's the vision? Mr. Trump, where's the vision?
The worst political decision I can think of that he could make in the middle, like when everything was going his way, I have no idea why he decided to shoot himself in the foot with his conservative base to appeal to a smattering of suburban moms who were afraid because they saw headlines about reproductive freedom, who are never going to vote for you anyway. They are not into you. Compound all of this with the fact that the Democrats have already nationalized this issue. The Democrats, who are extreme, and it's right to point that out, that they're saying this is a national issue. They're running on this, on the women's, what did they call the Reproductive Health Act, things like that, where it makes it a national right. They're saying we need to codify Roe v. Wade. Joe Biden's on there right now. We don't know what he's saying, but if I can, wade through the mashed potatoes, it's like every third syllable is talking about abortion rights. They want this at the national level anyway. So it's a moot point in many ways to say, well, this should be back at the states where everyone wants it. They don't want it there. And they're pushing the issue on a national level for a national election because they think it will gain traction with a historically unpopular and irrelevant and incompetent presidential candidate. I do not understand how you make an argument that it's not a national issue when the side that has all the political power currently is making it a national issue. Too late. It is. And so we have to have the moral clarity that responds to that. It's a states, leave it to the states issue pales in that under that type of weight. It will crumble.
Yeah, and I think it's important for me here to clarify also this is separate. Setting the goal where it needs to be on life is separate from the strategy of how you get there.
Okay.
And I can see I can see a case for, so for instance, one of the things Ron Paul talked about was criminal justice is enforced at the state level. So you define life at the national level and then you enforce at the state level. Okay,
Sure.
I can go with that. Because then it ties it into the rest of our criminal code. You can talk about tactics, and there's different approaches to tactics, but the goal still has to be national, because national, even now, I personally, I think that former approach that I just described is better than just having a law from Congress that says abortion is illegal, because that's the most likely to get repealed and picked apart in the courts. And I just don't think functionally that would work as well. But you can't drop it on the states, though, again, because you can't draw lines around humanity. You can't draw lines around a human person. But tactically speaking, if you look at this and just exactly what you were saying, who exactly is he? Who's he pulling over with this? I mean, Vox has already got up an article saying he's lying about it. Don't listen to him. Don't believe him. Who is going to believe him on this? I mean, if Joe Biden comes out tomorrow and says, I've had a change of heart and I'm going to build the wall, is anyone in the world between now and November going to vote for him on immigration? No, nobody. Nobody's buying that. Nobody is going to show up and say, "Oh, well, he got me. That's what I was waiting for, was just to hear those words out of his mouth." And in the same way, nobody that cares that strongly about abortion is going to support Trump because of that statement. Not a soul. Not a soul. And so I think it's a huge tactical error on his part. He needs a fired up conservative base going into November. And I guarantee you, because I'm watching the makeup of what we call the Republican base shifting. There's the traditional conservatives, but we're trying to box out under the basket, and there's a lot of elbows flying right now from sort of the new right and the different coalitions that Trump has built, that many of whom really bear hostility towards Christian conservatives. And I think this is really showing us who's in his ear, and it doesn't portend good things if he does get in office.
Right. And if we can shift now to our own camp, because I think we got to hold up a mirror on this one. Like I said, there was the initial statement, news cycle 1, news cycle 2. All the pro-lifers are shocked, stunned, saddened, slapped in the face, rhetorically speaking. Third news cycle, pro-life leaders rally around Donald Trump despite his betrayal, essentially, on abortion. Let's discuss, shall we? Here's where the rubber meets the road. We got to have a little family meeting now. As a pro-life advocate, this is not going to work, guys. This is not going to work. What I said and what I believe is that a statement like this, wherein Donald Trump capitulates on life, and let me just say, because I'm using very bold and strong language because I want to be understood well. And I've asked Donald Trump to his face about life. And now he's backtracked on even that. Because at one point he said he would support a 15-week type of bill. And now, according to this statement, he basically says, I'm done with this. We fixed it. It's over, guys. Leave it at the states. It's fine. Babies are nice and wonderful and joyous, but we're not going to protect them if they live in the wrong places. There have to be consequences for this type of thing. As you know, we're parents, we understand the boundaries and rules are all well and good. You may have the best kids in the world, but if they do something or they are looking right at you and you tell them not to do the thing and then they do the thing, there have to be consequences. Otherwise, they know that the rules are empty and that you don't mean anything you say. I don't think this move will win him anything, but it should cost him something. It should cost him the pro-life vote. Now, as to whether or not it will, I mean, there's a lot of justifications that people use, but essentially I saw in the same article that very high profile pro-life leaders, all the people that you normally see out with quotes, people that I respect and have worked alongside for years, some of whom have been on this radio show and others that I've done. How could this be? What a horrible statement. So disappointed. Everything that's wrong with it. And, one column inch down, but we still got to support him because Joe Biden is the most pro-abortion president that I've ever seen. And we've got to defeat Joe Biden. That sounds like a paper tiger. That sounds like empty words. Like I said, song lyrics and grocery lists are the only thing that keep my brain on track. Joel, I'm so disheartened by that. There have to be some sort of consequences. And I get all the backlash in the world from and the friendly fire that I experience for saying things like we should hold Donald Trump to the same standard. We should hold him to the pro-life standard that is in the GOP platform. by the way, that says this is what we all rally around and what we've always said. If he's going to abandon that, then he doesn't represent us very well. Now, does he? There have to be consequences for this type of thing. And the fact that there's not shows me exactly where we are as a nation.
Yeah, I think when it comes to support from the GOP, the problem is almost that we've been through this particular play too many times before. I've been through enough cycles at this point where I have the statements from a lot of moderate Republicans still ringing in my ears, that say very similar things to what we heard. Oh, it's for the states to decide, or well, it's a really complex issue, or well, it just needs to be between a woman and her doctor. Well, I'm really pro-life, but I also know we have to win elections. And how many cycles? How many cycles have we heard things like that from the McCains and the Romneys and who was the guy? Pawlenty that really let us down on that. But then there's been
that is a
well.
name I haven't heard for some time.
Yes, but there's been so many though, and at this point, it's almost like my cynical mind is thinking that really the only abandonment that's going to happen is from what would be the abolitionists, honestly, the people that are very hard line. I think. Everybody else is doing the calculation that they did in 2016 and 2020, which is how much of this is Trump at all, and how much is just the flavor of the week because somebody told him this and he doesn't have. Basically, it's people banking on him being a liar or a fool,
right?
Which is not particularly encouraging either, right? To the extent that he is knowledgeable and telling the truth about his particular stance on this, it's disqualifying. The question is whether he actually knows what he said at all, and whether he's actually going to stick to it or whether he means it at all, because we've also seen statements in earlier campaigns from him that were just off the wall, and then when he got in office, basically he just signed whatever the Heritage Foundation threw at him and all was well, and so I think that's sort of the calculation that I feel like many of these leaders are doing. The problem is it undercuts your credibility for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
That's the potential problem. And so I can see making a case that, well, he's saying this to get in November, and I can forgive him lying about it because I have, knowing what he did with Roe, I believe that he'll sign whatever Congress sends him. So I can see making that case, but man, it doesn't look good on paper. And I don't know that that's going to be convincing enough to turn out the base in the volume that he needs before November.
Right. And just a little word to the ear of fellow saints, praying that the guy you're voting for is lying to fool people into obtaining power, and that he'll then lie again and psych everybody else out to give him what you want. That's not a recipe for good things. That's no moral justification at all. And yet I hear people's earnest concerns. Well, what do we do? What then do we do? How do we make these decisions? And that's, what Laura Coates asked me on CNN, and, what it's they're left to do. I said, I think every single pro-lifer ought to make their voice heard to Donald Trump right now. In no uncertain terms, is this acceptable? This is not acceptable. I'm sorry. This is not good enough. And we have to raise that standard. If we as conservatives expect to have people to represent us, they truly should. If this is the most important issue to us, like we always hear it is around campaign time or fundraising time. And you said something interesting, which is that the GOP landscape is changing. The quote unquote conservatives are now more held together by one personality at the top and all the money. And now it's all about loyalty tests, basically. And I'm not in it for that. I'm not here to play games. I'm not here to win points and win prizes. I'm not here for that. I do not care. What I care about is doing the right thing. What I care about is the life and liberty and the prosperity of my nation, but of my children, of doing the right thing ultimately for the kingdom of God, where my allegiance lies. And if you're a fellow Christian listening to this and you're conflicted, I get it. I do. We cannot abandon our consciences. We cannot abandon our integrity. We cannot abandon what God clearly says is right and wrong in order to chase after political power in the here and now. We will eternally lose. The question I asked on social media over and over again yesterday is, because at the end of Donald Trump's statement, he said, you got to follow your heart, but we got to win. We got to win. And my question is this winning? Is this winning now? Where is this winning that you speak of? Mm-hmm. If we're willing to abandon the most vulnerable, if we're willing to say they no longer matter and we will not stand for them, in the interest of becoming electable for a moment, maybe, again, it'll win of nothing. But in the interest of becoming more electable, we throw the most vulnerable of all basically into the disposal.
Mm-hmm.
That's an eternal loss. There's no winning about that.
Yeah.
Change my mind.
Yep. I'm not sure I can change your mind on that. I will say, if you want to throw a mirror back on, the conservative right, as you say, I am a little bit curious as to where all of our organizations and advocacy groups and leaders that we've spent millions and millions of dollars of donated goods and time and dollars in, where are they right now coming out and saying, okay, we're pulling our endorsement, we're out. And the thing is, I can already answer that because you and I have been around the block on this a few times, but they're all questioning their own credibility, right? Because
Right.
if you're too loud, and if you are too make yourself too much of a nuisance to someone who's potentially in power like that, and then he wins anyway, then your group is done. And so it's so, I hate to sort of pull back the curtain on this to folks who maybe don't follow the inside baseball as much, but that is the calculation that advocacy groups and all the people who send you mailers asking for money, that's what they all calculate is, if we do try to push back on this, will we be finished with his victory? Because that will prove that we're irrelevant. And so I think all the people who should be leading out on this are not. I don't know that anything will. I mean, Trump being Trump, he won't believe he's losing until he's 20 points down. So, there's really not a whole lot to tip the scale on this, and I just think it's really a tragedy that this. Well, it's not a tragedy; it was deliberate that it didn't come up during the primaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people want to talk about how much Trump is not a politician. This is a grade A politician play right here. Don't say what you mean while you're running in the primary, because if he had said it in the primary, he would have got clocked for it. But now that there's nobody to clock him, now he comes out and drops a statement like this.
Joel, this is depressing.
Well, you know how it is when I'm on.
I know, right? I know it. Totality. Let's go back to that. That was fun. I think the encouragement that I have for people is just to make your voice heard. This is not acceptable, and this is not something where we should be out justifying it, because that's the other instinct. Is I was talking about that with one of the CNN producers too. They were saying, well, they're not, particularly thrilled with either choice. Privately, I think everybody's kind of in the same boat. Everyone's just really depressed when they look at this election. And I don't think that is something that the people of God can despair for. Our kingdom is not of this world, Jesus said. But at the same time, as we do seek to be good citizens here. We do need to be wise and biblical about the way that we vote. The struggle that we might feel in all of this, I think, is to justify sin. Because it's our guy, it's our gal, it's our team. And our team has to be better than any other team. And there's those old loyalties, or dare I say idolatries, that tend to come to the surface. So I think this can be a blessing in disguise. If we look at those things that are pulling on our heart and we feel the need to defend what is essentially indefensible if anybody else said it, that's a challenge for us to just raise the standard all the higher, to just say, it's not my will, right? This is not about me. It's not about my opinions. It's not about, I don't care who says it, it's still wrong. I don't care who does it. If Joe Biden came out tomorrow and, had some radical change of transformation, that he had repented on this and that he had suddenly been convinced that the preborn life is worth protecting, I would love to hear that.
Suddenly became a Catholic?
I would love to. Suddenly became a Christian. There was some transformation that happened. God bless it. Hopefully we're all praying for that, right? Mm-hmm. That heart of stone would turn to a heart of flesh in a biblical sense. And I would love to hear that. It doesn't matter who it is. It's God's standard, not mine. And that's the standard we need to raise high. And we need to be unafraid. That's not truth, sir. It is not true. And we expect better than this. That is, when we talk about the church being prophetic in this generation, that's what it looks like. It means being willing to be unpopular, being willing to not be invited to the fancy dinners anymore, because we're willing to speak up for, I know, right? It's the same chicken every year, guys. It doesn't matter that I'm tasty, but it doesn't matter.
I was about to say, we both have kids. You still have time for fancy dinners? Because I don't.
Depends on how charitable your grandparents are, how close you live, or the free babysitting. But you know what I mean? That's honestly what people trade. Are we willing to trade what we know down in our core is right and true, that matters enough to fight for? Are we willing to trade that for our invitation in gold to a fancy dinner once or twice a year? Or the fact that people look at us with, some sort of acclamation like we're somebody. I got news. Like I'm very comfortable with the fact that I'm nobody. And that's okay. What matters is Jesus Christ.
Mhm.
What matters is what he has to say, what he's done for us, and the world that he so loves. That's why we're here, is to share that message. And that message, I don't think, can be in concert with the language that devalues, with policies that inherently devalue our God-given, not subject to government approval, rights.
Yeah, and I think for fellow believers, my challenge would also be if you have to tolerate it, don't justify it. And there's a difference qualitatively in that. If you want to take part in the democratic process, you vote. I get it. The lesser of two evils is a thing. From the presidency all the way down to the board of trustees at the city level. You got to make some decisions that are difficult on the information that you have. But that doesn't mean that you need to set up a theological defense for it or a philosophical defense for it or sit there and justify it. And so when you get to what you need to do in November, if you're a Christian who supports Trump and you're a pro-lifer who supports Trump, and this isn't going to phase you because you're worried about your kids and your grandkids and World War III, I get it, all that, okay? Don't make excuses. Do what you got to do. Say I did the best I could with what I had, but don't justify it. Because that I feel like is where you cross a line scripturally. When it talks about keeping your garments white, talks about keeping yourself unspotted from the world. We all have sin. We have a great Redeemer, thank God. But what we justify then gives a window to what we'll become. And we don't want to become this. So if you have to make hard choices, you need to if you feel like you have to support Trump in spite of this, I get it. I'm not going to tell you you're not saved. I'm not going to tell you you're not a Republican, none of those things. But I also really hope that you have the judgment to look at this and realize how it will compromise your standard in the future. All of your Facebook interactions, all of your Twitter X interactions, and if you're still a weirdo who talks to people in real life, it'll affect those interactions too. So I just
somebody has to be that weird.
Right. So just be conscious of your witness in this. That's more important than the election cycle.
I think that's the type of thing that will bear up well as we look into the future. That's the type of calculation that Christians throughout time have had to do in a fallen world. What can I do for the kingdom today? We have to be honest. We cannot justify sin in anyone. We have to speak with moral clarity. Maybe this is my concern, is that we tend to use that almost as an excuse now. And just say, well, nobody's perfect. And so we kind of just let that depravity roll. And no one's willing to stand up and speak out about it and just say, oh, we live in a broken world. Like, yeah, there is a Redeemer, as you said, who has come to make all things new, who is in the process of doing this with you, who is sanctifying us and purifying us day by day as we walk in the light. And light can have no fellowship with darkness either. That doesn't mean that we're perfect right in the here and now and that we don't sin, but it does mean that we recognize the sin, that we put to death the sin in our own lives, as God said, and that will make everything around us a lot more clear. Not easy, but it simplifies an awful lot of things. So let that be our guide. Let the word of God guide us. Let it dwell in us. Let it make us weird in this day and age. Help us, Lord, to love our enemies. Help us to pray for those who maybe we were a little angry about at the beginning of this podcast. Just help me. I'm a work in progress too, y'all. So I appreciate the prayers. Thank you, Joel. Go get some sleep from staying up all night, chasing that eclipse. And until next time, our mission here on FaithWorks Live. Thanks for joining us, by the way. And if you want to pass this on to a friend, if you want to give me your feedback, I love to hear it. The mission that we have is unchanging, right? To love God, to serve people, and to live free. Thanks for being a part of our show on FaithWorks Live. Hey, what's for dinner? If you're like me, I hear that 15 times a day. And fortunately, I have a plan. It's typically Animus beef at our house. We are such big fans of Animus beef at the Haney home because it's just great quality beef. There's no steroids or antibiotics. It's naturally raised butcher beef. They sell by the quarter, the half, or the whole, and they support your local meat lockers so they can help you get it processed in a way that works for you. In this economy, it's good to have affordable options for your meat. And if you're willing to make a good investment in your nutrition for a healthy menu plan, I highly recommend Animus Beef. Contact Dave and Mary Lynn at animusbeef.com. They welcome your questions. They'll help get you on the schedule. They have locker dates coming up. Don't wait. Secure your locker date today. Go to animusbeef.com. That's OHNEMUS beef.com. In today's world, security has never been more vital. And at FaithWorks Live, we're proud to partner with VeriGuard Security. It's a professional physical security service, and they're really raising the bar in security and private investigations. Whether you need a team of professional officers to protect what you have worked hard to build, or their mobile security units for multiple properties or large locations, from business or corporate properties to your home or neighborhood. Perhaps you've got an event coming up. They secure quality security coverage for events large and small because it's about peace of mind and protecting you, your family, your team, and your property. Settle for nothing less than the best when it comes to your security. You shouldn't have to compromise. When it comes to security, you can trust VeriGuard. Contact them today at veriguard.us. That's VARA guard.us. For security service, you can trust VeriGuard. There's no better time than now to stand for life. And you can stand with Iowa's original pro-life organization, Pulse for Life. They're the longest standing nonprofit pro-life organization in Iowa, and they're dedicated to informing, educating, and inspiring a new generation to value the sanctity of all human life, from fertilization until natural death. They serve at the State House. They educate in classrooms, at events. They proudly serve on the coalition of pro-life leaders. They are on the front lines of the battle against this throwaway culture of death that we see all around us, and we are winning ground. Hearts and minds are changing, and the pro-life movement is continuing to grow. And you can be a part of the exciting things that are happening right here in our own backyard at pulseforlife.org and get your finger on the pro-life pulse. Sign up for their newsletter, find ways that you can make a difference, and how you can change hearts and minds with their pro-life apologetics course, pulseforlife.org.